I gave people all the stuff they really needed. Social Security checks, utility bills, TV guide.
I want a TV guidance counselor. TV guidance counselor. Staying up to watch all night, and everything's gonna be alright with my TV guidance counselor.
Hello and welcome to TV Guidance Counselor. I am Ken Reed, your TV Guidance Counselor, and this is the show TV Guidance Counselor, where I, as your TV Guidance Counselor, discuss classic television with an interesting person each and every week since Valentine's Day 2014. And my guest this week is writer-producer Chris Clues. Chris has worked on everything. Awesome dude, amazing stories. We talk about so many of my key comedic heroes in this episode. He wrote for SCTV, Night Court, show ran Night Court, wrote for I Married Dora. We discussed that here. Bob and Ray, just an awesome dude. Could have talked to him for 3 more hours, maybe have him on the show again in the future, hopefully, if he's up for it, and we can talk, we can do an hour and a half or something. And this was a listener suggestion. So thank you for hooking this up and getting him on the show, because this is the new contender for episode of the year. See if you agree or not. You can let me know if you agree. You can email me at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or ken@icanread.com or kenreadtvgc@gmail.com. Also, you can go to tvguidancecounselor.com or be a patron. If you have $1 a month, patreon.com/tvguidancecounselor, or $5 a month, you get access to the PDF archives of all the TV guides. Anyway, wasting enough time here. You want to get to the meat of this. Don't miss this one. This is a repeat listen one. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, Chris Clues.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Live via satellite from lovely New Jersey. Chris, how are you, sir?
I'm alive.
I can confirm, everybody. We have visuals here. You're only hearing audio, but he is, in fact, alive.
Right.
I'm so excited to talk to you because you've worked on so many shows that I absolutely love and that come up on the show all the time. And you have an excellent story about your entryway in, which we'll get to in a moment, too. But the first thing I really want to talk to you about is SCTV is my all-time favorite sketch show. Hands down. Dave Thomas has been on, and the Network 90s seasons, which I believe are the ones you worked on. When
That's right. That's
got the gang back together and we're in New York, are by far my favorite seasons. And then the episodes you worked on, it's like Sweeps Week, Polynesia Town, the classics.
Yeah. I think we won an Emmy for that.
Yeah. I believe you did.
I don't remember, but I know we won an Emmy, but I don't remember for what.
I think it was Sweeps Week.
I think Sweeps Week was right. Either that or Moral Majority.
Oh, Moral Majority is really good, too.
Yeah, it might have been Moral Majority. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows? Who cares?
Melon Vote's my other one in there, but I don't think you did Melon Vote.
Which one?
Melon Vote, yeah.
No, no. That was great, though. That was great, yeah. But it was so long ago now that I know I have an Emmy, but I can't.
That's a life well lived when you're like, I don't know what it's for. Whatever. It keeps the door open.
Yeah, it does indeed. It does. Yeah.
So when I talked to Dave, he was saying he took over as head writer when they did the Network 90. It was previously Howard Ramis.
Yep.
And he basically said Ramis didn't really respect John Candy that much as a writer. He didn't think of him as a writer. And Dave said, I recognized John was a brilliant writer. He didn't write like anyone else. So what I did was, is I had 2 writer's assistants, and I said, look, John's going to make up an excuse to leave the office, follow him and write everything down he says. And at the end of the day, you'll have great sketches. And I just wanted to bring that up to see if that was your experience.
Well, if you got a minute, I'll give you a great
absolutely
story.
do.
Okay. So, Stu Kreisman was my writing partner. And some of the other guys that were in the office, Bob Dolman and Dick Blasucci and Paul Flaherty and John, John, whose last name will not be mentioned because of the shame.
Yes.
The shame on him. So
And the program he was in, the relocation program.
that's right, and my memory. So all three of those together are the reason I can't name him. But so here's what happened. So Stu and I shared an office. John, whose name I can't remember, was in the next room, and I get a call, and it's Candy. And he's escaping the office. He says, I'm going out. I'm going to tell him I'm going for my trainer, but I'm just going to go back to my hotel. He said, I want you guys to come. Bring a lot of paper and pencils because I got a lot of ideas. So I said, okay. So we went. The three of us went over there. And it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we go. We're in the Four Seasons Hotel in Toronto, and we go up to his suite, and he's there, and he's pacing the floor, and he's saying, "I got so much good stuff." He said, "Let's just get right into it." And the first thing he says is, "I don't know what it is, but the title is FBI Jockey." So we looked at each other, and we all agreed that we didn't know what it is either. So he started to talk, and he kicked around some names, and he had no sort of a plot. It was just stuff, but it was funny stuff, and we were writing it down, but there was nothing, there was no adhesive.
Right, it doesn't connect in any
nothing to keep it together, no. So we're doing this for about an hour and a half. We're still working on FBI Jockey, and we haven't got a goddamn thing. So he says, you know what we need? We need a drink. So, okay, it's 5 o'clock and it's Toronto and Canada and you drink in Canada. So he calls for a bar car. A guy brings a bar car up, full bar car. And we have 2 or 3 cocktails, martinis, and we had somebody had a Manhattan, and it was like like we're in the Thin Man, but we were in a hotel room with a man who was not thin.
Yes, the opposite.
So we go back for about another hour. And he calls the front desk and he says, could you get us a reservation at the steakhouse across the street? So we get a reservation and we go across the street to the steakhouse, and we're dressed shabbily, and every man in the room is wearing a jacket with the Canadian family crest on it. I mean, it's a very upscale steakhouse. And so we sit down and we have another drink. So now it's like 4 or 5 drinks in, and my partner was not a drinker, and he was just silly. He was just being silly. And we set the all-time record for the use of the F word.
In Canada, Canadian history.
In Canada, yeah, where everybody's polite.
Yeah.
We're like, fuck.
So relatively low bar there, but still impressive.
Oh, yeah. So so this guy gets up from his table and he walks over. And he's sitting with his family. And he says, excuse me, but my family is here, and we're using really bad language. And we're immediately chastened, and we're so sorry. We kind of all want to point to John, but we don't. So we don't do it anymore. And if we do it very, very low, sotto voce. And then John pays for their dinner. So he made their evening.
Yeah.
So now we've had our steak dinner, and we're still kicking around FBI Jockey. And he says, let's go for a walk on Yonge Street. So we go for a walk on Yonge Street, and we stop in every bar we can find. We're having just voluminous amounts of drinks. And it's about 1 o'clock. It's about 11 o'clock at night. And we've been literally there since 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We've been drinking. It's 7 hours have gone by. We've done nothing but say the words FBI Jockey over and over and over again. And he says, I guess we should go back to the hotel and go back to work. We're like, oh, yeah.
Maybe.
That's a good idea. So we start on our way back to the hotel, and there's a strip club. And we go into the strip club because he goes into the strip club, so we go in behind him. And I've often described this way. The sexual tension in the room was so high that if one bottle of Molson's had fallen off the table and broken, everyone would have killed each other. So we walk in, and we could all feel the tension. And there is a woman on stage whose name I maybe John with no last name remembers it, but I don't. But so let's call her Doris.
Okay.
So Doris is up on stage, and she's dancing on a bear rug, which I thought was hilarious since they're so close to Russia.
As is the law up there.
So she's dancing around and got a little G-string thing on, and her number ends, and she gets like no response. It's like these guys are, they're way beyond the pale. So John says, I'm getting up on stage. So he goes up on stage, and he says, all right. He says, you know who I am? And it's like, of course they do. He's Johnny Toronto. That's how he was known up there. So Johnny Toronto was in the strip club talking to the drunks. And he says, I want you to put your hands together for this fine lady, or whatever her name was. And she was thrilled, and she's hugging him, and she's sweaty, and he's hugging her back. And the applause is amazing. And he buys drinks for everybody. And we leave with the happiest group of people in the world, and we leave them behind him. Now, there's a coda to this story. On the way back to the hotel, we're about a block and a half away from the hotel, and 2 cops have pulled over 2 bikers. They've got them up against the car. They're frisking them, messing with them. This is Toronto, where you can't make noise after 10 o'clock at night. So they got their radios blasting which never makes sense to me. A guy in a motorcycle with a radio,
Right?
But doing all that stuff, and John stops. He walks over to the cops and he says, "Excuse me," and they turn around and go, "Oh my God, it's John Candy!" And the bikers are like, "It's John Candy!" So now the 4 of them are in the John Candy fan club, and he says to them, "They seem like nice fellas. Why don't you let them go?" So they let him go.
Of course they did.
Yeah, they let him go. And that's how much power he had. Now, it was like being disciples of Jesus. We were walking behind people who, he was beloved in that city. Now, so we leave, and now we're almost at the hotel, and we hear brum, 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 brum. The 2 bikers, they come by, and they're in the street, and the guy screams, "Johnny!" And he turns, and the guy throws him a dime bag of pot.
That's all he needs at that point.
This is the end of the evening. And that's the story.
Yeah, that 100% tracks. Like, Candy's one of those guys that, I've been doing this a long time, talked to a lot of people. He's one of the only people I've never heard a bad story about. In fact, only, amazing, incredible stories about him.
You'll never hear it.
Fee Waybill was on, and you wrote the episode that the Tubes were on of SCTV with the Fishing Musician. Yep. And he had a very similar story. He was like, we got woken up at 7 a.m., and John showed up with a car, and he's like, we're going fishing. And we're like, why? And we went fishing all day. He had a cooler of beers and pot, and we did that. And then he drives us back to the hotel, and we're like, well, what are we doing for the show? He's like, oh, you did it already. We're all done. He's like,
that's so him. One more quick one. You remember Harry's sex shop?
Yes. Guy with a snake on his face.
Harry with the snake on his face. So they're going to go up to a town called Leduc, which is, I think, just north of. I think it was north of Edmonton where we were shooting the show. And by the way, if you ever want to have a terrible time, go to Edmonton.
What I've heard.
That's not going to make me any points with the Edmonton Town Council.
A lot of listeners in Edmonton. I'm going to have to.
Oh, shit, I apologize.
Yeah. In fact, the whole town listens.
Oh, boy. 8 of them.
Yeah, they get together once a week and do it all at once.
And there's always extra chairs.
It's true.
So I didn't have anything to do with the sketch, but they were going to shoot it up in this town because they had this location, where the guy Belushi with the big white hair comes out of the door and, hey, nice hair, do that thing.
Yep.
And so we get up to. So I just went along for the ride. So we get up to the town and the setup, and we start to shoot, and the generator dies. So there's no power to shoot, so now we have to wait till somebody can go down into town, into Toronto, and come back with the generator. And we go into a bar to have lunch, like a bar and grill, So we go into the bar and grill, and we sit at the bar, and there's, probably 6 or 7 crew, and John and Dickie and a couple of extras, and me and somebody else. And so we're sitting at the bar, ordering sandwiches, and John's got the snake on his face.
Of course.
And there's probably 25 people in that bar who, A and B, A, don't recognize John Candy, and B, don't really seem bothered by the guy with the snake on his face, which led me to the idea that every night somebody came in with a snake on his face.
Or some other reptile.
Or some other reptile on his face, yeah.
Yeah, because was it Jules Haalmeyer? He was doing Jules was doing the cultural stuff.
Jules is the greatest.
Oh, and hilarious too. Like,
did you have him on?
I've talked about doing it. I haven't had him on yet, and I really would like to because he's just so funny and
he's really funny. Yeah. He's a really good singer.
Yeah,
he's a terrible dancer,
which is perfect.
Which is perfect for the Jules Haalmeyer dancers, and the loveliest guy.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've heard. Just nothing but good things.
Just the nicest guy.
So let's backtrack a little bit. I imagine, did you get the SCTV gig through the Lampoon, or was this from some of the variety shows you worked on?
Yeah, we had worked on a bunch of shows in 78, 79. And in 1980, our friend Rocco Orbisi, who you should actually have on the show.
I'd love to.
Rocco is a producer. He's a producer of the first show we ever worked on in L.A., and it was called Alan King's Second Final Warning, and it was a very funny show. We were so unhip to our friends that we were writing an Alan King show, but we thought, you know what? It's work, man.
Right.
So he had gone to CBS, and he had pitched an idea, so he pitched the idea, and it was this troupe of actors, writers, director, and some crew were going to travel together and do a show from a different city in America every month. It was like the monthly late night city show.
So like Route 66 meets SNL.
Yeah. But it's a terrible idea for practicality. Nobody wanted to be on the road all the time, and nobody wanted to go to Detroit.
Right. There's a reason people didn't join the circus anymore by that point. So it was going to be Cleveland because Rocco was from Cleveland, and he sold it. So he had sold a show called From Cleveland, and what closed the deal was SCTV had. The syndicated SCTV had gone down, and it wasn't being produced anymore. And he made a deal with the cast, with a lot of the cast: Dave, Joe, Catherine, Andrea. Am I forgetting somebody? Eugene. Yeah.
It was the five. Those were the five cast members, and so we took the job. And because we were fans of SCTV, and got to be very friendly with Dave immediately. I just became like best pals with him, and we go off. We didn't do any pre-work. We just went to Cleveland together. Checked in at Jimmy Swingo, and you got to hit the G in this word. Jimmy Swingo's Celebrity Hotel. And it really was Celebrity Hotel. While we were there, the Boomtown Rats were there. The Pretenders were there.
Ohio, yeah.
Blackstone, the magician, was there.
Oh, wow. Junior or senior?
I don't know. Smokey Robinson was there. I mean, it was jam-packed with celebrities.
Yeah.
So we go to Cleveland to do this show, and we did it, and we were there for, 4 or 5 weeks, and we wrote it, and we shot it, and it was really fun. And you can find it on YouTube.
Oh, I'd love to see it.
So I'm out this is the only thing I'm plugging. I'm plugging a 5,000-year-old show.
Awesome.
So
that you don't see anywhere.
You can find it's called From Cleveland, and it's really rough and crazy, and it's funny, and mildly funny. But you should look at it because it's interesting.
I'd love to look at that. So
we do the show, and then we go home to Los Angeles, and Stu and I arranged for Bob and Ray to come and do the interstitial narration on it. So that
was my other question. I knew that they were involved, and I'm massive Bob and Ray fan. Boston guys.
Yeah, they were. And great. I can tell you another story about that. Yeah. But so they come to Santa Monica. and we're doing post work with them, doing narration and stuff. And Dave and Eugene are there, and they're talking about hearing the rumblings that SCTV is going to come to NBC. So when it happened, it was just before the writer's strike of 81 or 80.
It was 80, yeah.
80. And they asked us to join the show, which saved us from the writer's strike and gave us one of the best experiences we ever had. So that's how we got that show.
And it's the kind of stuff you can't plan. You just end up in the right place, right time. You can still deliver when you're there. And you're just like, if people enjoy working with you and kind of enjoy hanging out with you, you get gigs a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's pretty much how we got our career. I mean, we were good at what we did, but we're generally pretty fun and, that sort of thing.
Don't cause a problem, and people are happy with it. Yeah,
Bob,
well, yeah. Bob and Ray, I think in '78. So they did a weird special that was Bob, Ray, Jane, Andrea, and Lorraine. Yeah. I think, right? Not Andrea, Jane, Gilda, and Lorraine.
And Lorraine, yeah.
And it is, and I love SNL, but it is the funniest thing that aired on SNL slot that entire year, if not a couple of years.
Yeah,
it's so funny. And I still don't understand why Bob and Ray have not been re-embraced by like modern comedy fans, because the stuff they were doing is like alt comedy. It's so weird and silly and smart.
Very much so. Yeah.
I don't get why they never really.
I think the explanation for that is that they were two old white guys.
Yeah.
Two old white guys a long time ago.
But really taking the piss out of old white guys.
Sure.
It's so
slow talkers and
subversive, and it's just great.
Very subversive. Okay, I can tell you something now because I'm full of stories. Okay, so I had a cousin. My mother's cousin worked at a radio station called WOR in New York City, and Bob and Ray were the afternoon drive time guys. Okay. And they were unlike any afternoon drive time guys you will ever find. And so she went to them because this is before we had really gotten anything. We were writing that book of 50 sketches.
Right, to get to you were guys trying to get on SNL.
Yeah. So she got us in to their studio with them for an entire show. And we sat on the other side of the glass, and they sat right up in front of us, and we watched them wing the show. Mm-hmm. Not the whole thing. I mean, they did, if you remember the things they used to do, was Mary backstage, loyal wife.
Yep, Man on the Street.
A car 94 or whatever that was. And they did all those sketches that day off index cards that they obviously had jotted down some ideas for, and were doing basically what Larry David ended up doing much later, So we spend the afternoon watching, and it was just remarkable. I mean, it was remarkable, and we were in awe of these guys. I mean, really, they were like two accountants.
Oh, yeah.
You're looking at two accountants who are the funniest guys in the world.
I would say they remind me of, they used to work at a radio station in Lynn, Mass with Ed McMahon.
Yes.
And Ray kind of had an Ed McMahon kind of vibe to him.
Yes, he was a kind of a big guy about it.
Bob, big news guy kind of thing, but not, you wouldn't be like, this guy's hilarious.
And you had Bob, and he was this guy.
Just you would never think they were as weird and funny and quick as they were. And I'm sure you know this part, but for my listeners, they were straight news guys here. They worked at WBZ. And I think they were both doing on-air news, and they got a late night shift, and they got bored, and they would just interview each other as characters and make stuff up on the air just because they didn't care. And people were like, this is amazing.
Yep, that's who they were. Now here's as Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story. So the shift is over, and we're like, they come out. They got a little, they're wearing like fedoras and overcoats, and they look like any guy, in that time. And so Bob, who was the friendlier of the two, says, so what is it that we can do for you? And we said, well, the truth is that we'd like you to read some of this stuff and see if there's any way that we could write for you, because we are devotees. And we were fairly rare. Even then, guys, and I'm talking about, I'm 24 then, and maybe Stu's 22 or something like that. And most of the people I knew didn't listen to them, didn't. I mean,
They were not
knew
hip.
them.
Yeah.
No, they weren't hip, and they were the hippest guys in the room. So Ray says, well, we're going to go up to the office. Why don't you come up with us? Oddly enough, Ray sounds just like John Candy in my in my
I believe they seem like similar type guys.
Well, they were big, big guys. So we go up to their office across the street, and literally there's a pebble glass door that has their company name on it, And it was just so great. And we come in, and it's like Jake's office in Chinatown.
Yeah, private detectives.
And so they're getting their stuff to get ready, because they're going to jump on the train for Westchester or wherever they live. And so Bob says, I'll tell you what, we'll read some of your stuff, but you have to go buy our book. Now,
Viral marketing.
I'm not kidding you. They had guys up every afternoon. That's how they sold 7 books. So I'm not kidding you. I had like $3, and I think Stu had a 20. And so there's a bookstore, the original Barnes and Noble, when there was only one store. And you're going to wait here? We'll wait for you. Come back with the book. So we run down to Barnes. It's like 6:30 or something. We're going, do you have Bob and Ray's book? And the guy's not even sure. I have to look it up. And the book was called "Write If You Get Work, Otherwise Hang by Your Thumbs." I think it was cool. So we buy the book, and we bring the book back, and they're still there. We thought they were fucking with us, but So Bob says, I said, well, we got it. And he says, that's good. He said, you go ahead and read the foreword. And so I start reading the foreword. He said, read it out loud. I said, oh, of course. So reading the foreword, and the foreword is this. Completely paraphrased, but this is the foreword. When I first came to New York in 1954, I had one mission, and that was to write for Bob and Ray. And it goes on and on and on about how 3 or 4 pages of how this guy was desperate and sought them out and finally found them and told them of his tales of getting to them so that he could ask for employment. And what they said to him was the last line in the foreword, and it was this: nobody writes for Bob and Ray. Now, let me tell you who the author was. Kurt Vonnegut.
Well known for his comedic work. I think Slapstick of Another Kind. Jerry Lewis's most beloved role.
Now we read them. I read them to them, and we get the message.
Yeah. And then it's just kind of like, got it.
Just said it, but they put us through our paces, which led them to liking us, and not reading anything, which was fine because it was such a thrill. They signed the book and gave us our money back. They gave us like $13 back.
That is really funny.
It's hilarious. And so then when we do the Cleveland show, Rocco had originally had a guy named not Kid Rock. It wasn't Kid Rock. It was kind of something like Kid Rock, but anyway, he was the voice of Cleveland, and he was going to be the voice of the show.
So
and
the DJ guy.
Yeah, he's a DJ guy. So he backed out, and Rocco said, "We're stuck." And I said, "I can make a call to Bob and Ray." And he said, "Fuck yeah, if you can do that." Sure as shit. I called him up and I said, "Do you remember us?" Of course. Remember, you're the jerks that ran down for the book. So they said yes, and they made a deal, and then they came out to Santa Monica. And that day, as I just said, kind of was the beginning rumblings of us going to SCTV.
That's amazing. So to back up for people, the book we were referencing. So you and your writing partner, you had written a Barney Miller spec script, which I imagine that show resonated with you because you're from New York. That show probably felt very New York.
Yeah.
And then
It was really funny.
It's amazing. It's my favorite sitcom. And later you got to work. Did you work with Reinhold Weege on Night Court?
On Night Court.
Yeah. So, Night Court was sort of like the kindler, gentler Barney Miller in a lot of ways, and especially in the early seasons.
It was Barney Miller on the spectrum.
Yeah, that's exactly correct.
Yeah.
But you said you wrote this and you're like, this is a terrible script. It's more like a parody. We should start doing sketches.
Yeah. It was awful. It was not awful, but it was stupid. It was something that is inexcusable. And this is 1974. This is before all of the Laverne and Shirley's and all of the Gary Marshall stuff came. It was when there were not that many half-hour comedies, but Barney Miller was a really smart one. And it was very New York. Danny Arnold is a very New York writer, and so we didn't get. Those days there was no internet, and there was no way to get in New York. There was no way to get a script, so we couldn't record the show because there was no VCR. So this is, Wright Brothers plane went right by the window. So we just took a shot. We wrote down the names as we heard them. We wrote them down phonetically. And then we began to write this thing that turned into months of work, which is an indication you're not so good at this. Months of work, way too many pages. Maybe instead of a 40-page script, it might have been 110. But it was gem after gem. It made no sense. It was stupid. And we found out later, when we did get a copy of the script, that we had misspelled everybody's name except for Barney Miller, and oddly enough, a character named Wojciechowicz.
Did you know Polish guys?
And we got it. It's like we hit the Polish lottery, Yeah. So it took forever, and then we loved it while we were doing it. And then when it was all over, we read it, and it was stupid. It was just dumb. It was not well done. It was not Barney Miller, but it was this odd, funny version. Not that Barney wasn't, but a funny in a weird way.
Different kind of humor. But you're really trying to hit a bullseye right away first time you throw a ball if you're trying to hit a Barney Miller script.
Yeah. We should have done My Little Margie.
That would have been easier.
That might have been better.
Ghost and Mrs. Muir.
Oh, that's pain. Just the thought of that. You'd have to sit and watch that. That to me is punishment.
Although Charles Nelson Riley's always fun to watch.
Oh, I didn't know he was on it.
Yeah. Have you ever seen his one-man show, by the way?
No.
Oh my God. He did maybe in the early 2000s a show called Life of Riley, and there's a famous carnival fire in Connecticut from the 40s or 50s or something.
Yes.
He was in it as a kid.
He was in the fire?
In the fire. So this story, he tells this like harrowing story, and he makes it funny and fascinating, and that's his sort of origin story. And it's this amazing story about showbiz, and it's sad and funny. And then the thing this is a total aside, sorry. The thing I remember the most from it is he was good friends with Burt Reynolds. And back pre-internet, when people had a question like, is this celebrity dead or not? They would write to a newspaper or TV guide and ask. So what Burt Reynolds would do is he had a clipping service, and anytime they found one of those, is Charles Nelson Riley dead, he would get it, have it blown up and framed, and send it to him. And he had a ton of them. It was so funny.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
That's really funny. That's really funny.
I love it. But that's on YouTube. I recommend watching that.
I will.
Yeah. So you went to Barney Miller and you're like, maybe we should try to write more stuff the way this came out.
This is the shit that we're not going to, this is not going to work. We love it, but we gave it to other people to read who had seen Barney Miller, and they returned it without saying anything. So you know what I did? I wrote this story on Facebook because I realized I've been dining out on this story for many, many, many years and had never written it down. And by writing it down, it allowed me to remember so many of the details, you know. So it was so much fun to do that. And I took hours and hours to do that, just in the reminiscent pool, you know. But anyway, what happened was we decided that maybe sketch comedy was something we could do, because Laugh-In had been there, and the Smothers Brothers, and you know, there was Sonny and Cher, but there were a lot of good writers on those shows, a lot of good sketches, and of course Carol Burnett, the Carol Burnett Show, but none of them, except maybe the Smothers Brothers, but they had like hip sketches, and we thought we could write hip sketches, that we could try to be hip. So we just started, and we would sit together. We actually had an apartment. We were roommates with a third guy, and whenever he came home, we were sitting there laughing. And then we'd tell him what we'd done, and he never laughed. He says, "That's stupid. You guys are high. That's why you think that's funny." And were.
Well, yeah, but everyone was pretty much.
Who wasn't?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this one guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, one guy, and he was our roommate. So anyway, we were just writing, and that took up most of 1975. And then, as I said in the story, October the 10th, we looked at each other and said, "Where are we ever going to sell this brilliance?" And October the 11th, we found out, and I'll call it by its real name, NBC's Saturday Night came along. And so Stu was at his parents' house on Long Island, and he watched it on Saturday night and talked to him on Sunday morning, and looking at this giant book of sketches. We had about, I said 50, but I bet there was 100. I don't know, and so much shit to wade through. So, but we said we gotta go. Here's what we have to. Here's our plan for Monday. Let's go get jobs at NBC.
It's easy as that.
Just write that down. Get milk, get jobs, and pick up your laundry.
Yeah.
So. We worked together at CBS in administrative jobs, and I was the world's worst person at that job. And he looked great compared to me because I was so terrible at it. I'm told by my daughter now that I'm probably ADHD or something. I can't apparently can't do regular jobs, so which is all right.
That's what comedy writing is for.
That's right. So anyway, we had this big book, and at lunchtime. We walked out of 57th Street and walked all the way to Rockefeller Center and went into the lobby, the beautiful Rockefeller 30 Rock lobby, that incredible Art Deco lobby. And so we go in there, and there's two guards sitting, and one guy's doing the New York Daily News jumble. I will never forget that as long as I live, and he apparently was struggling with it. And the other guy was just standing there, So I walked up to the desk, and I looked the guy in the eye, and I said, "Excuse me, where can I find Saturday Night?" Now, to this guy, that was an existential question.
Yeah.
He had no idea what I was talking about. In fact, thought I was a wise ass. So, which I was.
It's like, are you asking me Tom Waits lyrics?
He wouldn't believe me. This guy, no. So the guy with the jumble is sitting behind him, and he looks up at us, and he says, 3. And we say, "Thank you," and we leave. And I know that guy turned around and said, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And then it was explained to him, I'm sure. So we go up to 3, and we come out of the elevator with our big book, which was heavy, and we both carried it. And just walking around, and stopped a guy and said, "We're looking to get jobs here." we sound like there's a turnip truck outside. We fell off. And so the guy turned out to be Al Franken. And he was moving furniture. I guess people were co-opting each other's offices.
Yeah.
You know, the trouble was starting already. The show had aired once. And so we go, he takes us to this woman sitting at a desk outside of an office. And he said, this is Kathy. So we meet Kathy. Her name was Kathy Minkowski. And Kathy was as nice as a person could be to two jackasses who showed up. And we said, hi, we're here, we're writers. And we're writers, and we would like to get a job here. And she kind of said, oh, all right, but you have to have your agent submit. And we said, we don't have an agent. And she said, well, you need an agent to submit. So it's sort of the end of the conversation. She said, but we don't have an agent, but we do have this incredible book of 400 pounds of comedy. And she said, that's great. You seem very nice, but you need to stop and you need to leave now because there's nothing here for you.
There's no path for this.
There's no path. So we were at first taken aback by her small-mindedness. And I said to her, look how funny looking we are. He's really short, and I'm really tall. So right away you have comedy.
Yeah.
Right away you have comedy. And she said, oh, you're definitely tall, and you're definitely short, but you definitely have to go. So we said, okay, but here's what we're going to do. We are going to leave this book with you, and you can give it to Lorne Michaels, who I think is the boss, and you can call us up and phone number in there, give us a call back, and we'll come and go to work. So she said, if you leave this, I cannot take it. I can't. I would have to put it in the trash. And we sort of said, we don't believe that you have that in you. You look like such a nice person.
And also you probably can't lift it.
Such a nice, I have to get someone, maybe that little guy Al Franken can help.
Him and Davis can do it.
Yes, Tom was a great guy, by the way. So we leave it. And we go to the elevator, like smiling and waving, and go inside the elevator, doors closed. He looks at me, he says, she's going to shit can that. And I said, yes, she is. And we never made copies. Now, that would be the name of my autobiography.
We never made copies.
We never made copies. So we go back to work. Stop at the Cordial Bar next to the Ed Sullivan Theater, which burned on television with Howard Cosell. Mm-hmm. So we go back, and then we go back to our jobs, and I screw up the job for the afternoon, and then it's time to go home, and he has a car because he's going out to Long Island, and so he's going to drop me off at a subway station on 7th Avenue, and we're driving along, and we're both very depressed because our entree into show business has not only been closed in our face, but it's been boarded up, and we're never. And he had a connection at NBC or ABC or someplace in the sports department. And I had no connections. I had no idea. I had no skills. I was the perfect candidate for, to be shot to the moon. So we're on 57th Street, maybe a third of the way off Broadway. And he's talking, and I'm not listening. I'm looking out past him at the people walking by in the street. And there's a red door, and the red door opens, and out comes John Belushi and Dan Ackroyd and Garret Morris. And they walk directly in front of our car, which is on the inside lane of the two lanes on 57th Street. On the inside lane, And there's a taxi in front of us, and they get in the cab. And I turned to him and I said, here we go. Follow that cab. And he did. And he followed it to the Atlas statue at the front of 30 Rock on 5th Avenue across the street from St. Patrick's Cathedral. And he turned to me, and there was a cop there, and the cop was screaming for us to move. And the cab pulls up to the curb, and we pull up kind of 1/3 of the way in behind the cab, and the cop is so mad, and he's yelling. And so Stu says to me, he said, if you're ever going to make an impression on anybody, do it now. So, okay, I get out of the car, and it's like the way I describe it, I know you can't see it, but it's if you take your hands and just run them in front of your face a lot, that's what it looked like. There were that many people, and this hulking, skinny look jackass comes through the crowd, and as they're getting out of the cab, I say in a far too loud voice, "Stop. I'm not going to hurt you." Now, this is New York. This is New York in the 70s, man. In the 70s. And so Garret Morris runs away. First time I ever chased a black guy, ever. And Belushi kind of falls up against the cab and covers his head. And Danny takes a fight stance. And so I said, look, I'm not. I may be crazy, but I'm not crazy now. I'm telling you what this is, and I recount to him 3: the guards, Kathy Minkowski, Al Franken, the book, and that she's going to throw it in the trash. So they listened. Well, Danny listened. John just hated. He just thought I was the biggest asshole he had met all day, and so Danny gave me a card and a pen. And he, go fill that out. And so I give him my phone number and my name, and they leave. They go in the building, and Stu's gone around the block like 4 times, and he pulls up, and I jump in the car, and he said, "What happened?" And I said, "I honestly don't know. I don't know what happened." I told him what happened to us today, and I gave him a phone number at the house, and so. Don't know if we'll ever hear from him. Well, 11:40 that night, he calls, and he says, "Chris, this is Dan. I read through some of your stuff. There's a lot of crap in here." And I said to him something like, "Hey, thanks for calling."
Yeah.
And he said, "But there's a lot of very clever things, too." He said, "Why don't you come by tomorrow? I have some thoughts for you." So we went by the next day after work, 5 o'clock. We went over to NBC, and it was writing night. It was Tuesday. And we had to wait about an hour and a half for him to be free to give us some notes. In the meantime, we meet Gilda, who was this kind. She went and got us sodas.
Of course she did.
She went and got us, like, Cokes. And we saw Al Franken again, but the buzz was amazing on the floor. And finally, Danny comes out of some room, and he finds us, and he takes us into his office that he shared with Tom. Tom
Schiller?
Tom Davis, maybe Tom Schiller.
Yeah.
I think they might have shared an office, but Danny was alone in the office. And he gave us good notes on maybe 10 sketches. And he said, "I think these are the strongest that I read." He didn't read them all, but I wasn't going to ask him to at that point. And so he gave us notes, and we went away, and we went right back to the apartment, and we worked on them that night till about 2 o'clock in the morning. And we brought him over in the morning, and we left him for him. And sure as enough, he called us over at the office. He said, "This is we got some promise here." Well, he worked with us on and off for like twice or 3 times a week for like 3 weeks.
It's amazing.
It was like the best comedy class I ever had. And it was the only one.
Well, yeah.
So we had a pack of, I think, 12 sketches that he was going to present to Lauren, which he did. And Lauren gave them to Michael O'Donoghue, who's the head writer.
Strange guy.
Don't get me started. He set up a meeting with Lauren, like in 4 weeks into the show, and we're sitting there, and I'll never forget this. He had this in his office. He had this one of these really corny office things where, like, "Oh, I spilled my milk," and and it's always there. It was like a fake vomit, it was the same idea. Okay. And he was so nice to us. And he said, "Fellas, I don't know where the show is going. I haven't read any of your stuff. I've given it to the head writer, and he's going to take a look at it, and I'll see what he thinks. And he said, but I'll keep you in mind. And you got a real good rabbi in Danny Ackroyd.
Yeah.
And we said, boy, don't we know? And he could not have been nicer to us. He could not have been nicer. So on the way out, we were leaving to go home. We stopped in to say goodnight to Danny. And Danny said, oh, I forgot to tell you, I called Sean Kelly over at National Lampoon. And I told him I got a couple of guys for him. So we went over to meet Sean the next day. And he had sent some stuff by messenger. And he did all this for us. And totally kindness of strangers. And Sean had read the stuff. He says, funny. He said, so you have a job. So we got a job Wednesday instead of Monday.
And that's like Hughes was working there at that time? And
No, it was before him.
Okay.
This is before him. This is end of 75.
Okay.
John came in 76, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you worked there for a bit and then started writing for some variety shows?
No, what was going on while we were working at the Lampoon, we got an agent named Steve something or other.
You won't hear this.
No, he's dead.
You really
He
won't
is. So you're really funny now. So yeah, and he introduced us to Alan King, the comic, who I always loved on Ed Sullivan, with the wife jokes and lost my luggage, that kind of stuff. And so we would go up to see Alan after we would go to the Lampoon, and then which was on Lexington Avenue. Then we go up to Fifth Avenue to see Alan, and he'd drink and tell us stuff. And he let us work for him for 1 year for free.
Oh, that's nice of him.
Yeah. I asked for a raise, and he said no. I said okay. So we did that while we were doing the Lampoon stuff, and eventually he had that ABC special, and that led us to television.
Which is such, again, is what we were saying before. Like, it's this trail of people who are just like, oh, this guy's fun to hang out. Like, this is a good guy. And you end up, you never know where it's going to, the sort of pinballs are going to land. Did you ever end up working with Dan later?
Yes. Matter of fact, we saw him a couple of times when we were first in L.A. We moved to L.A. in 78. We ran into him a couple of times. But the most prominent time post him helping us getting our lives started, really, was at the 1982 Emmy Awards.
Oh.
And he was Catherine O'Hara's date.
Of course he was.
And I was sitting in a seat next to John Candy. My wife was next to me, and then Stu, I think, was on the other side, somewhere around there. And I turned around and talked to Catherine, and there's Danny. And they said, do you remember me? And he said, of course I remember you. So I can't fucking believe you're here. He said, that didn't take long. I said, well, it really didn't. So we got reacquainted that evening, and we had a lot of fun that evening. We had a deal at Warner Brothers in a couple of years later, and he had a deal at Warner Brothers, and we were in the same building. So it started out as, let's play cards on Tuesday, right, and let's drink and let's do this stuff. And we did. We wrote a pilot with Danny that didn't get picked, that didn't even get made. And then we wrote another pilot. He had this thing about space, he had this thing. Oh, yeah. So he had an idea that he'd written with another writer who's also a friend of mine, and she was not happy with the way that all went. So he came to us. He said, CBS wants to do this, but we have to rewrite it. We have to basically reimagine it. Do you want to be involved? We said, yes. So we wrote it with him, and we shot it, and it was a disaster. It was a terrible show. But we were just really good friends, and we owed him so much. One night we went to his house. He bought a house about a block away from the Chateau Marmont, where John Belushi died, and he bought it for that reason, because he's also a spiritualist.
Oh yeah.
And he had a strong belief that he could get in touch with John. So he was in this house and with his brother Peter and another guy who I don't think I ever knew. And we would come over every once in a while. If we had a writing session or something at Warner Brothers, we'd come over, with him. And we brought a writer friend in with us to help punch up the script, and his name was Lee Maddox. And Lee was one of the greatest funny guys of all time, and Danny just loved him. So the four of us went over to the house one night, the Chateau Marmont adjacent house, and Peter was there, and the other guy was there for a minute. But Peter was there, he's hanging around, and he says to Danny, he says, "I heard her today." And no idea what they're talking about. It doesn't matter, And then Danny looks at us. He said, "Do you know this house is haunted?"
You do now.
In fact, I know now. And I wish I had known before. I said, "House haunted," and she is a ghost here, and she owned the house for 40 years. She was the vocal coach at MGM. When they made all those musicals. Yeah. She was the women's vocal coach. And apparently she was this big opera, this big John Candy opera woman, just a big woman. And while we were there, we heard her.
Really?
I swear to you.
Wow.
And Danny said, "Let's take our beers and go to the guest house, because she's going to start making a lot of noise." And I said, I believe you. I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear it. I want to go home. But we did go to the guest house, and Peter stayed in the house, and he came in later. He was kind of white, and he said, "Oh, man, she's PO'd tonight." What nice way to live.
Yeah, and then probably 2 years later was Ghostbusters, right?
Yeah, that's exactly. I think it was the inspiration. That house was the inspiration for Ghostbusters. Now, I have one more Danny thing. He made a movie called
Nothing But Trouble?
Yes, Nothing But Trouble. John was in it, and Chevy Chase was in it, and Demi Moore, I think,
Demi Moore, and Valerie Bromfield. Yeah,
Valerie was, John loved her so much. So, and so did Danny. So he comes into our office at Warner Brothers, and he said, "Hey, I'm writing something about a crazy town." He said, "You want to read it?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So he gives us copies to read, and then he goes away, and we read it right away, and it's like, "Oh, this is horrible. Yeah. This is awful. He can't do this. This is the guy's got a penis nose."
Oh, yeah. It's a straight up horror movie.
It's a horror movie, but he thinks it's funny. Yeah. It ain't. So we sort of mentioned this to him, that I'm not sure that, I don't know, doesn't feel that funny. Well, he was a little insulted by that, and he said, "You wanna help me make it?" I said, "Oh God, no, please."
I don't think I can tackle that.
No, I don't want. No. And we can't, because we have this. We're doing a pilot, so we can't do it. But he lets us in on the whole run of what's going on. He brings us in to show us the design. First they design, then the next step is they built a set. Mm-hmm. They built
a huge set.
Well, but he had a miniature that took up one of his offices, took up the desk and a bunch of stuff, like ironing boards and everything else, just to hold this thing up. And it was huge, and I realized it was like a kid's toy. It was the little version was a kid's toy where you could have all kinds of stuff happen. You could the little car would go down the thing and then it would flip over and the bell would ring. And what do they call that? Was that
like a Rube Goldberg?
Like a Rube Goldberg. That's right. It was very much like that. And then they built the real set, and there it was. And he had us over this. What do you think? And I'm thinking this is going to be the worst thing ever. But I love you so much that it's cool.
I love that he managed to get that made and made the movie he wanted to make.
Yes, he did. Nobody wanted to see it, but he wanted to make it.
But it was like, because I always loved Neighbors, which people hated. Yeah. I loved it. But, and him and John switch roles in that. And he's so good. Like, I wanted to see more straight man roles from Belushi and more like just crazy people from Ackroyd. And so it's like someone goes, "Oh, do you? You sure?" It's like smoking the whole pack of cigarettes. You know what I mean? Here, how about nothing but trouble then?
That's really funny, and that's really right. That's really correct. You're right.
Was the pilot you were doing Madman of the People around that time? Because I was around this.
No. That was
the pilot or Madman of the People is.
The pilot was great. The pilot was the highest testing pilot at NBC since Cosby.
Wow.
10 years later. But that's a book.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was just be the first to read it.
It was a terrible experience.
I've heard many a tale like that at NBC.
Well, you know what it is. It's like the old saying that don't get what you wish for.
Careful what you wish for. Yeah. Dog that caught the car.
Yeah. Be careful what you wish for. It might come true. And it did because, it was, we had a small show on Fox and we had done the final 2 seasons of Night Court. So we were really very well thought of at Warner Brothers. And that was the show that we had to wait on so many casting sessions and put this thing out and wait while, people would take 3 weeks to. Yeah, it was just pain.
Yeah.
It was just pain.
Yeah, watching something that you love and think is great slowly get pulled apart.
The pilot was so great, and I mean, I'm very happy. My dad came out from New York, and I have the pilot, and I can hear him laughing.
That's worth it for that.
It was worth it for that, but that was it.
Well, I don't want to keep you all night because I will. I could talk all night. There's
I don't mind.
2 more things I want to ask you about, and you mentioned it. So Night Court. Did you guys kind of show run the last 2 seasons, basically? We
did. Yeah.
So this may be apocryphal, but my understanding is the show ended and then they uncanceled it for that last season and kind of brought everybody back and they were like, what?
Yes.
Okay.
What happened was we were doing this show on stage 8. And on stage 9 was Night Court. And we would run into John Larroquette and Harry and Charlie Robinson, who we knew because we were there the first 2 seasons. Yeah. We were staff writers the first 2 seasons.
It was a mid-season replacement the first season. You were on that, and then the first full season.
Yeah, it premiered
January 1983.
January 84. 84, I think.
That sounds right.
Yeah, I think so. And it was 84 because my daughter was born in July, and we were into the second. We were into the first full season. So what had happened with that was, the way we got that gig was that we had written a movie after SCTV. We had gone to Columbia Pictures and pitched a baseball movie. For Bill Murray.
Oh, wow.
That we wanted him because we found out he had just had a kid and he named him Homer Banks. So Eddie, was Ernie Banks and Homer was, I guess, baseball.
He guested on one of the SCTVs you did. Didn't you have Joe DiMaggio's Steakhouse or something?
He played. That was funny.
Said get him some spumoni.
Yeah. That's the fishing grotto, the thing. So stupid. So anyway, we had written that script, and next time we talk, I'll tell you a great story about that. But we had written a script, and Reinhold Wiggy got a hold of it, and he had a guy named Tom Reeder, who worked on the pilot with him, and was kind of a consigliere, you know. And but they needed some writers, so Warner Brothers gave them a list of writers, and we were not on it. I don't know why, but we weren't on it. And but somebody inside gave him the script, and he read the script, and he said, "I want these guys. You know, I don't want to have meetings. I read these guys. So this is really funny. So I want these guys." And we had a great relationship with him while we worked those first 2 seasons. And John and Harry became really good friends, and
also tall guys. So very tall cast, tallest cast in history.
Cast in the history of show business, and so we left after season 2 because we thought this thing ain't going anywhere, and so we went over to I think we went to Newhart, or we went to a deal with Paramount.
I think it was Newhart in '85,
might have been
'86.
Yeah, that was later. So we went to a deal. That's right. We went to an overall deal at Paramount where we did a couple of pilots. And anyway, but we were friendly with John and Harry. And so cut to 1989, we're doing this show called Malloy for Fox.
Mayim Bialik
and Jennifer Aniston.
Yes, yep.
We discovered Jennifer Aniston at 19. Another great story about that. I won't bother you with it, though.
We'll have to do a part 2 sometime if you have the time.
Yeah. Or just call me. I'll just tell you the story.
I'll buy you a coffee.
So, in the men's room, next to between stage 8 and stage 9, I'm peeing, and Harry walks in. I knew he was there. I'd seen him around, wave, you know. He said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, we're doing the show over on stage 8. And he says, "You should come and we got another season after this. You should come and do it because you were here at the beginning. Be great if you were here at the end. And frankly, the guys that are doing it now, we don't like." So I said, "Well, that sounds great, but we have a pilot at CBS. We have a pilot script at NBC. Thank you, though, and come by and visit and whatever." Well, that afternoon, we get a call from Bob Broder. Oh no, I'm sorry. We have to go to see. We get a call to go and see Harvey Shepard, who was the president of Warner Brothers Television at the time. So we go to see him. Now he's the same guy that okayed From Cleveland.
Right.
So
I've known him a while.
He doesn't make great choices sometimes, but he said to us, "Fellas, I'd like you to take over Night Court next season." And he had this great wig that I called a hollowed out poodle. I swear to God, that's what it looked like. And when he get excited, he would move around. I used to be able to do this when I had a lot of hair, but I can't do it anymore. But it was like this, you know. So anyway, he's a lovely guy. And he says, "I really want you to do this." And we turned him down. We said, we really want to get our own thing going, and we're really close on a couple of things. He says, I know, but we can. So we leave him with what we thought was a firm no. I am not kidding you. We get into the office, the phone rings. And it's Bob Broder, who's our agent, the super agent. And he says, "So I heard that you talked to Harvey." I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're going to do that job." And I said, No, Bob, we have these. You help, you got to. He said, "You're not listening. You're going to do the show. It's one season. And you're going to do it, and they're going to pay you a lot of money.
And it's canceled, so it's just one.
And you don't have to worry about it. You can't even fuck it up."
Yeah.
So I said, "You're underestimating us."
Oh, can I?
So we said, "Well, what's it going to take?" He says, "Well, I've already talked to Harvey. Here's what's going to take. We're going to buy out your 2-year contract, write you a check today."
Which is no small thing.
We got a new 3-year contract.
Yeah.
So I looked at Stu and I thought, yeah, Bob's our boss. He says he's our agent, but he's really our boss. So we said yes, and it was a delightful experience. It was a delightful experience. The only person who didn't like us was Marsha Warfield. And she made it very clear that she didn't like us. And it took us, we asked every head of the department, we took every head of the department to lunch to make them understand that we really cared about the crew, which I know is always a good idea, even if you don't mean it. But we did mean it, sort of, because we didn't really know them. And then took every cast member to lunch. So there was a lot of lunch. Marsha would not go with us. She said, no. She said, if you're going to, fine, I'll show up, and go to work when the season starts. And it was bugging me. It was killing me. That don't you know how nice we are, how charming we are, how funny we are? And she was still, once we got in, we opened, we had our first script reading, and it was real good and went over really well. Stu and I wrote the script, and it was very funny, and she liked it, but she didn't like us that much, and it took probably 4 shows, and she showed up with a sweatshirt that said, I fucked up on Chris in school. And she gave us each one of those.
Oh, that's amazing.
It was very cool. I love her.
She's
now.
great. Have you watched the current one?
So fun.
The new Night Court?
You think I'm frozen?
No. That's your answer. Okay. But she shows up, and Julia Duffy shows up, who I always love.
Yeah.
But so then you do that final season, and then they're like, great, congratulations, show's over. And then they're like, oh, wait a minute.
Well, no, it wasn't quite like that. It wasn't quite. It got, with the 8th season, had 24 episodes, and I think we were heading for the last roundup. We had great writing staff. In those days, I think we had 12 writers or something. They spent money on shows, and we figured out later on that we made a profit for Warner Bros. Television of $1 million a week.
Easily, yeah.
So that's a good profit, So we had these great writers, and we had worked. What we did was, before the season started, we went to Brandon Tartikoff's office, and we copied something that Cleese had done. We went out and we worked on the story arc for the season, and we were intent on changing it because it was just the same old stuff, wacky stuff, and nothing really about the characters, except Dan's lasciviousness, and that's about it.
That was this season. Was that the 2-parter with Dan in Alaska, or is that in season 9?
Yeah,
that's season 8.
I think so. No, that wasn't. No, that wasn't. Yeah, it was season 7.
Okay.
I think. Yeah. So we decided we were going to have a different arc and have all the shows connect. Not story-wise, but there was runners that ran through the entire season, and the important runner was, we thought, you know what, Dan has been lascivious for so long, and he's he had 6 Emmy Award wins or something like that, but at that point it was old, and times were changing. It was 1989, 1990. And things were different than they were in 83. And even in 83, he was an outlier character. He was still, a little politically correct. And he in the second season, first season, he's this conservative guy who was, because John's so naturally great, that it still worked, but the character wasn't that good. And Riney found it in season 2, making him lascivious, and then he really hit the gas,
which
man.
Only Larroquette could pull that off and not seem like a criminal.
Like a schieve, what we used to say in Italian, like a schieve. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, so we had that idea. So what we did was, once we had what we thought would be, we didn't have the whole season laid out, but we had the arc of the season laid out. And we had heard that Cleese had to pitch Faulty Towers to BBC. So, and what he did was with his wife, who was his co-writer.
Booth, right?
Yes, yes, she's great.
Amazing. And he's still incredibly complimentary to her contributions to that to this day.
Oh, he's a great writer, apparently. Anyway, so what he did, we followed him with it. We got our somebody to, I guess our secretary, to go find us a roll of butcher paper, and we pulled it out and started writing on it. And we laid out the arc of the season on about maybe 6 twists of the papers. The only way I could describe it. And we brought it to NBC with us. And we said, and Brandon said, "So what are you thinking about the season?" We laid it out on the floor. We said, "You can walk all over the season right now. It's right here. It's on." And he knew that Cleese had done it. He thought that's just fucking great. Warren Littlefield, on the other hand,
different guy, different style.
Yeah, different style. No style.
So that was that the Phil Foundation stuff? That was that arc.
The whole idea was to punish him, and at the end, he was to be broken. You know, and then there wasn't the end. And then we had to figure out a way to get him back in,
which is so hard.
It was so hard to do, but we did our best. I don't know if it was great.
There's some fun
I don't even know
that season.
But there's a lot of funny stuff in, and he was the Phantom of the Opera. That's the only way we could figure out to get him back in. That he's so crazy that Stu and I wrote those 2 episodes. Gilbert Gottfried was in it, and it was actually very funny. And John hammed it up; he loved it, And then, but once he was back, but he didn't come back. The 3rd episode was called Dog Court, and he was now the prosecutor in Dog Court, written by Nancy Lee Myatt, which was so funny.
That is a great episode.
So funny. It was a great episode. We did the Night at the Opera episode where he's in the box because Harry's got a girlfriend. He can't believe it, and he wants.
And you do the It's a Wonderful Life one too. Although I think it aired in February.
We wrote that. We wrote that. Yeah,
which is always a fun one.
It was so much fun. It was. We had a sign made by the props department that we put over Video Village. And it was "Welcome to the happiest place on earth."
Well, imagine when you.
Oh no! It was this. It was "Fuck Disneyland, happiest place on earth."
Well, imagine if you're writing for that sort of murderer's row of people who can just sell anything. It must be really freeing and
not only freeing but easier. So much easier. You never had to worry about anybody. Every single cast member. Every one of them could hit the joke.
And do it 10 different ways. Like Lara Kett, I've seen him do line readings where it's funny 8 different times in different ways.
Yep. He was by far the most talented, but Charlie could hit a joke real well. Marsha could really hit. In the early days, Selma could hit the joke if she could remember the joke. I used to sit next to her at table reads. That first season because I just got such a kick out of her.
She used to be a writer. Didn't she write for your show shows or something like that?
No, she wrote for the Caesar Hour.
Caesar Hour, that's right.
Yeah. And she was a delight. We went to her funeral. And it was such a Selma thing. It was a Jewish ceremony, and it was lovely. Inside it was a forget the name of the. I call it the 405 Cemetery.
Yes. I know the one you speak of.
Yeah. So Hillel or something. I don't know. Anyway, so we go up to we put a yarmulkes on and we go in and we do and it was lovely. It was really lovely and it was funny. I think either Harry or John may have spoken and it was lovely. I mean, we loved her. Everybody loved her. And then it came time to entomb her. She was in the wall somewhere, And so we're all there, and there's this device of some kind with a lifter, like a
little cherry picker, kind of like a
dead for dead people. So there's the box on the cherry picker, and the door is open. Her tomb is open, and so now there's 3 Mexican guys working there, and they're going to put her in the wall. Except the two of the guys dropped the box on the third guy's finger, and he couldn't get it out. And I cannot tell you what the laughter was like. Screams of laughter, except from that guy.
Poor guy.
And the 2 other guys, because they did it, But I'm sure that guy's finger was crushed, and we were screaming with laughter because she would have loved it.
This poor guy goes home and like, these absolute ghouls. They just stood around laughing. It was so painful.
And he'd be right to say that.
The potato. The last thing I want to ask you about was a show that comes up often here. Because it was, and you didn't write this episode, but it was a 1-season show, I Married Dora, which you worked on. And the finale of that show.
It was a fun job.
It's great because I love Elizabeth Pena. I feel like
she was great.
Juliette Lewis, one of her first.
Juliette Lewis is in it. Michael Leeson was a lovely guy.
Fun show. Not the most groundbreaking show to start with. A pretty cute kind of will they, won't they.
It was cute.
But then the final episode. So I don't know if you were still working there, but it was one of the rare instances when they knew the show was canceled. So the final episode, the guy, he's gonna fly somewhere, and Dora decides she loves him, and she goes to the airport to tell him, and he comes out, and she's like, "Why aren't you on the plane?" And he goes, "I got canceled." And she goes, "Your flight?" And he goes, "No, our show." And then they pull back and show the crew, and as a kid, I'm watching this completely mind blown because this is the first time I've seen like a fourth wall break on, because that show was not a show that did that kind of thing.
No, it was straight ahead. And Michael thought for sure that it was going to be a hit, and it wasn't. It wasn't. There was a good effort,
good time slot. People. It was on after Belvedere, which was It
was the only. I think it was the only show we ever did, a series we ever did on ABC. I think it was the only one. I told you about the baseball movie. So what happened with that was the head of production at Columbia took it to New York. So he was going to take this script to New York and give it to Bill Murray, who was making Tootsie at the time. So he takes it to New York and he gives it to Bill Murray, and don't hear from him ever. But John, the Columbia guy, said, I told him what it was. I explained it to him. He was laughing. He said, "This is great. I want to make a baseball movie." And, Bill is Bill. So years go by, and we're working with Leeson on that show. And I tell him that story. And he said, I think I can top that. Now, this being show business, of course you can top that because you have to. You have to. Obviously. So, and he does. And here it is. So he says, so I wrote a movie called The Survivors, I think it was, or The Survivalists or something. And I wrote it for Bill. And it was a Paramount. And Paramount goes to Bill with an offer. Bill says, "Let me read the script," and disappears. And Paramount never hears from him. And a year goes by and they're still waiting on him. And then they say, forget it. He's not even gonna read it. So they get Robin Williams and Walter Matthau, and they make this movie. Yeah.
Oh yes. Okay. Yeah.
Is
I remember this movie.
Bomb. It's a big bomb. It does no business. It's not a good movie. Yeah. It's Yeah, they hated it. That's everybody hated it.
I recall that.
So anyways,
they were like took particular umbrage because they really liked Matthau and Rob Williams, and they were like, "How dare they make this?"
So anyway, so the movie gets made, it gets distributed, it does no business, and that's that. Years go by, and it's in this is tell you how old this story is. It's in the $1 bin at Blockbuster, if you know what that means, and it's yellowed.
Oh yes.
So it's been there a long time.
Yeah.
Leeson gets a call. Bill Murray, I'll do it. True story. That's a long.
That's what we call a long game.
Sure. That's what everybody says.
Man, well, thank you so much for doing this. I've loved talking to you. And you got to write a book because just selfishly, I want to read it. Yeah. Because selfishly, I want to read it. So please do. Thank you so much for doing it.
Ken, you're very welcome. It was really a pleasure. And it's nice to talk to a guy who knows what he's talking about.
How great is Chris? So many good stories in there. I'll be repeating these forever. So I cannot thank him enough. That was just so fun. If you have people you'd like to get on the show, again, shoot me a message on the social media or emails or whatever. And I will do my best to get them. And thank you guys for listening. I sincerely appreciate it. It's tough out there. So you're giving me something to look forward to. I won't get into it. Anyway, I'll see you next week. So I hope you'll be here for a brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor.